Good evening. The Quabbin Regional Superintendent Search Subcommittee calling to order. We have, for attendance purposes on the subcommittee, just want to do a quick roll call on that.
Deb Chamberlain,
Here.
Mr. Marsh, Dave Marsh,
Dave, you have to unmute. Can't hear you.
just wave to us, Dave.
Here.
Okay.
There we go.
Joanne Cormier,
Here.
Walter Nutter,
Here.
Peggy Thompson, I believe will be arriving at around 7.
It's okay.
Okay.
So we
Mr.
have,
Brophy, you're here.
I'm here. Good evening, and I just wanted to, this evening, thank you for coming this evening. What I want to do is kind of kick it off, be able to share information that I put a packet together, and then kind of like have the subcommittee kind of go forward. I just like to do a quick overview of what's in the packet, highlight a few things in regards to a superintendent search. I asked Lee to come to be able to give his observation, reflection of what happened in the past when the Quabbin Regional School Committee decided to do the superintendent search process themselves and what that entailed. And then we can probably make, possibly the subcommittee can make some further decisions as we continue to move forward. I also would like, if there's not, I don't think there's objection. I know I spoke with Deb when we first learned about Superintendent Dr. Muir's intent to retire. And I wanted to know if Deb and Walter would co-lead the search process so they can lean on each other. We have, although we reached out to see if we could have representation from all towns, and Hardwick, nobody stepped up, nobody was interested. That's okay. So we do have we kind of like having representation from the towns if possible on a search committee, and we can talk further on that. But to be the co-chairs, Deb and Walter, are you willing both to be able to share that responsibility? And I can turn it over to you two to go forward on this, to lead. Would you two be willing?
Sure, that's fine, Mark.
Yes. Absolutely.
We can work together.
Work together. And I just figured that wherever how you do it, you can split whatever you need. I'll defer to Deb as kind of the lead with you. But I will do that. Deb is, as she stepped up to do more roles and responsibilities as chair and vice chair, truly appreciate it. And thank you, Deb, just to give you another person to rely on along with everybody else that you can rely on. Make sense?
I appreciate that. Thank you.
You got it. But I'll let you know, but if it's okay and there was no objection, I'd like you to be the lead and then do whatever you need to do on whatever you need to do. So, what I'd like to do to make it easy, some of us are here in person. Thank you. I have a packet and I spoke, are we recorded?
Yes,
Do we have to read the statement?
we probably should.
Okay.
I didn't even think about that. I have way too many things to
And
type.
Deb, do you mind if I use your file to look through this stuff?
Of course
have a
not.
pile.
Help yourself.
All right.
I do have an extra pile here, Mr. Oldham.
I'll just
Like
go
it.
with it.
Okay. This meeting will be recorded and will be posted to YouTube and other social media platforms. By participating in this meeting, you understand that the recording could contain your video stream or your audio stream, including images of yourself or anyone in the room with you. If you choose to enable your video or audio device during the meeting, as well as anything or anyone else that may be in the background, could be recorded. The recording could include any opinions you contribute and anything you say about yourself. On occasion, chat within the meeting could also be captured in the meeting recording. Therefore, anyone attending the recorded meeting may have aspects of their personal data recorded if they actively participate or not. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to just do that as perfunctory, but as a realistic perspective of being recorded. In our packets, and I know Jess will bring them up as we go. The and the agenda is discussion of a district profile, superintendent job description, superintendent search options, timeline. We'll come back to that, but what I'd like to do is go over what I have in a packet for you, for everybody, because again, would like to just kick this off and then give it to the committee to start moving what you guys would like to do to recommend to the full committee and everything else. So I think that's right and fair. And I think you'd appreciate what we have in our physical packet when you can stop by, but it's also posted on the portal, correct?
In the drive, yeah.
So in our packet, and I just wanted to kind of quickly outline, not go into it, but in our packet, do you want to put up the
Yep.
first two is, one is a job description of the superintendent. It's a basic template that we had, and we can change, and even though you'll see like qualification on a superintendent, when you see number 3, previous experience in office, kitchen, et cetera, that was, listed in there as obviously a space holder, a holder, because whatever type of job description templates can be moved around. But we have a job description of the superintendency. And so I want you to take time to read that. You're not gonna be able to do it tonight, and that's okay. That's why we have this packet for you. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pages, and it also outlines too what a superintendent position looks like. It obviously follows to the obligations under the standards that the superintendents would follow. So that's something to take a look to see if it needs to be updated, tweaked, done as we continue to go through the process. The second in our packet is the internal. We'll quickly bring that up just to show you. It says sample on it as well. This was the internal candidate posting last time we did this in 2018, which when I get to the different perspectives of how to do a search, both you can do it, a school committee can do itself, it can outsource, it can do a combination thereof. But last time, this was our internal candidate posting, because a posting is different from the job description, depending on how you're going to use that posting. To the world, to regional, to newspapers, to the web, whatever we do. In our packet are the next two items is a reference point from our professional organizations and along with NASDAQ about superintendent searches. It's just some information that is what is available with no cost option with MSC that they have for opportunities of being a resource or a referral. And then other types of outlines, MSC regarding to full searches when a school committee hires to go from an A to Z. NASDAQ is also in your packet, information about what NASDAQ does off their website. The last time in 2018, some may not be here as new, and some of us that have went through this, we did listen to a presentation from NASDAQ and MASC at that time. So there are ways we can learn and listen, or we can also do what we call a scope and service, and we could talk about that further on that if we wanted to even do it even a little quicker. But it's information that's needed for a resource and a referral for your team to be able to make informed decisions that they'd like you to do. In the packet, next one is the mass search. It was a contract. It was a sample back in 2018 when we did it. The first one that we have in your packet, it was the one that was offered MSC for $9,500. We didn't do that. The committee at that time, it went to the administrative review at the time, central office, and the authority the team gave me was you allowed me to have a conversation, and we were able to look at what we were doing on the search in 2018, which again was internal, and we could do some of the perspectives, and we only did a portion outline with MSC when we hired them. And that I have on the second part of the next. So this is just an example of what MSC was going to ask at that time. The next one here, if you scroll down, and if you have it as well, this was what we ended up agreeing to with MASC, which was an internal posting, did a profile, superintendent profile, did the survey, did the focus groups. And then from there, they made a recommendation. They kicked the tires of the internal candidate, whoever wanted to apply internally. And there was a name that was recommended. We interviewed Dr. Muir, as we all remember. But again, at that time, the last bullet I thought was very important. We had, I think, a very good search the way we did at that time for under $1,000, which we're never going to get that again for $1,000. But at least it was outlined of what we did. The next in your packet was dealing with questions that you could ask a superintendent search firm of what type of what they could offer. So we figured that was a nice sample to have in your packet. Next was I wanted to give a minutes. I thought it was appropriate back on October 10th, 2017, that what happened at that meeting. This is public document. We were able to do it. It talked on bullet 2, talked about the superintendent search. There was a procurement over 10,000 was discussed. Under 30B, if a company goes over 10,000, according to 30B, we must seek out 3 bids for identities. We would first need to develop a scope and sequence. I can defer to Cheryl. Cheryl, is she here?
She is.
I can defer Cheryl to hit the procurement piece for us in a few minutes when I kind of turn it over to you guys. But I thought I'd just kind of tell you what it looked like and what we did back then. And we had a good advisory people along, not people, we had an advisory, we had Cheryl keeping us on the right path if we were going down to what we had to do. And at the same time, good and best practices in relation to what a process would be. The next in your folder is a leadership and superintendent internal screening process that was put together when MSC consultant was working with us. So that kind of outlined and gave the dates of how it worked. Next, a sample is sample questions regarding superintendent succession. What strengths, what was important. So that was another piece for us to have as we embark on the superintendent. I know there's a lot of material, but it makes sense to have a thorough folder for the team to be able to move forward. Next.
Excuse me, Mr. Bilfield.
Yep.
When I looked at these pages again, these are both very, very similar. I think one was what they were going to discuss at the forums, and the other was possibly the actual survey that was put out, but they do cover the same basic questions. So just so you know.
And this was part of the survey work and the focus groups. So again, it shows, the next one is the survey that was done. So again, if we decide to do it, or if you, recommendations if you were doing internally or working with a group of what they would be doing. Next is the district Quabbin Regional School District leadership. This was the reflection that was put together, that was brought, correct?
From MASC. correct?
MSC, when we worked with them, this gave us the information that we went forward to be able to say, okay, what did the public, what did the, she worked in all groups, student groups, what did faculty groups do, what did community groups do, those type of things. School committee, she spoke to the school committee, so that all groups, we use the word stakeholders was used, but again, this is the outline that came. Some of you might remember this and haven't looked at it since, and hopefully we didn't have to look at it, but we do. Working with Jess was able to get in our pack another sample of an invitation. Right now, Hudson Public Schools is going through a superintendent search, and they hired NASDAQ. And they are consulting with NASDAQ in their search. And here was now another survey perspective that was outlined, due, and again, they were able to share it and a sample, and again, for your packet. Next is, you may not have it, or do we have that? Post, it's in there too.
Everything in your packet is on the drive.
Developing questions for superintendent candidates. Some of you might remember that when we were interviewing and we listened to MSC, they had a packet together. This is another perspective as we developed our questions. Even when we had the interview with Dr. Muir, we were able to, again, as a committee, chose questions, participated. There was always I don't like that word because we're 100% transparent, but we were clear, concise, transparent, and involved the school committee members to put together those type of perspectives. Couple more items and then I'm done, and then I'll do a couple more things and kind of almost moving on. I really truly would like to. Here was the questions. It was a public forum. This is a sample. This showed what we asked Dr. Muir at the time. This is again, you as a committee will be able to help put things together and drive that piece. The last one in here was an example. It was an example of a brochure. And we didn't do a brochure because we didn't go out to the world. We only did the internal perspective as we decided. That was not only the subcommittee recommendation at the time, and it was the recommendation of the full committee of how they did it. But I wanted to give you example of, I had Hampton Wilbraham. And matter of fact, it was in our packet that time in 2018 from Mass. I believe that's where I got it from. So it was more of a triptych. It folded over. I think I put it, here it is. I don't know if anybody can see it, but online, it looked like this. It was folded.
You can't see because
Yeah,
I'm
you probably
sharing the
can't see
screen,
it.
so you can't.
Okay. It was folded over from the Hampton Wilbraham. It gave the outline, the profile. Again, I wanted to give you an example of how one kind of outlined it. Also, the timeline, I thought that was important. That was back in 2016. And, again, their submission was April 1st. So it was an example of that there's time for us we must do our work, and you will do what we have to do. And it will be the work of the subcommittee to go forward to the full committee. So I wanted to give you that outline, number one. Number two, I wanted to say in 2018, we did do a internal contracted with MSSC, a limited perspective of because we did some things ourselves. You saw what we did there, and that's what we did then. Before I move it a little further along, I'd like, if Lee would like, because I was not here, but I'd like to think that there's another perspective that a person who ran it could at least give us observations and comments if you decide that you wanted to do it kind of not their way, but what they went through. Lee, would you be willing to share?
Sure. So I was the chair of the search committee, subcommittee, when Dr. Marshall left the first time. And there are a lot of similarities here because we were taken by surprise, just as we were taken by surprise, I think, last week. Dr. Marshall left. She was not looking to leave, but a headhunter who apparently was very good at what he did convinced her, after all the years she was here, to go to another district. And that's what happened. So we had to, same thing, get ourselves together. And the first thing we thought was that, okay, if this headhunter is so good, why don't we hire the headhunter who took away our superintendent, and maybe he could find a superintendent almost as good, if not as good. And we came to an agreement with him. And just 2 weeks into the process, he got hold of us and said, listen, my wife has become very ill. I'm dropping all my work. I need to be with her. Well, obviously, we understood that, but that left us in a little quandary. So we spoke with NESDEC. Mask didn't really offer anything then. NESDEC offered something, but I think they were asking like $15,000. So we kind of spoke internally, talked amongst ourselves and thought, you know what, we think we can do this ourselves. And so that's what we did. And the people working for us, working with us, the administrators, they did a great job. They put a lot of information together. We sent out a lot of flyers, et cetera. We worked on our timelines, and that's what we did. So we went out on our own, time consuming, even that aspect, mainly for our administration people. We got 51 responses from all over the country. Idaho was the furthest west that we went. So we broke into a couple subcommittees, and we had a review committee, and we all took these 51 applications home, each and every one of us, reviewed them separately, and then we met to speak regarding what we wanted to do. We didn't set any parameters as to say, okay, well, this is what we'll do personally. We kind of all did it on our own until we got together and then started going through each one. My personal thing was I kicked everybody who had errors in their cover letter. And the cover letters were pretty much one page. Any kind of weird, not even weird typos, nothing like it was like, oh, gee, should this be a colon or semicolon? People misspelled Quabbin. One person actually misspelled somebody's name. They referenced somebody that they knew and they misspelled their name. They were just pretty, I kicked 12 right there. And then when we went to the speak, I said, this is what I'm doing. If you want to bring up their resumes, we'll discuss them, but I'm not even proposing their resumes, because if they can't put together a cover letter, if they can't proofread it, I certainly don't want them as superintendent. So anyway, we winnowed them down to about a dozen. And at that point, it went to another subcommittee who, in discussions, et cetera, got them down to 7. And the 7 we presented to the full committee. And there was a lot going on at the time. I'm just trying to tighten it up. The full committee interviewed all 7. We never tied ourselves to a minimum, and I'm glad we didn't. We talked about a minimum 5 candidates going forward. But after we interviewed the 7, the full committee, we had 3 that were acceptable, for lack of a better term. And a fall off from the 3rd one to the 4th was so great that we didn't even want to put a 4th and 5th in there, because there's no way we would have hired them. Nice people. They did what they did well, but they weren't ready to step up. And so we ended up with 3 people, and each one had somewhat of an issue. The woman we ended up hiring, she was the superintendent of Gil Montague, a very small district, and we knew there were going to be problems there because it was a small district. And we were going to move into here, but she had, her background looked good, PhD. She did a lot of other stuff. She looked good. The gentleman from Northbridge, who we interviewed, he was supposed to be a financial, I don't want to say wizard, but supposedly like a financial wizard. We went down, so we went to all 3 districts of our top 3 to interview not only them, but to interview as many people as we could within the administration and some teachers. When we walked through, we were like blown away by how much was going on there. Tutors for some of these kids, they had little separate classrooms for kids that needed extra work, et cetera. We said, wow, this is great. And then we found out that next year they're going to have to cut $2.5 million from their budget because they had overspent for 3 years. So the financial wizard, we weren't sure what was going on with that. That was the first thing. But the second thing was we knew he wanted to be superintendent at Leicester High School. That's where he came from. It was kind of general knowledge. And the superintendent of Leicester at the time had been speaking retirement. So that wasn't a good thing. The third person was from Littleton. She was the acting superintendent there at the time. And pretty much we knew she was using us for leverage because she wanted to be superintendent at Littleton. But she was really, really sharp. And we went there for the interview. And some of us really would have liked her. She was much younger than the other two applicants. But yeah, so she pretty much got the offer from Littleton. So, you know, she was, even before we made the decision, she wasn't involved. So during the time frame, we had two interim superintendents. Both of them were really great. We even talked about how, gee, would it be nice if they put an application in because we really like them. And in looking back as to what they did and then what our superintendent did for the 2.5 years she was here, the biggest thing I came up with was that the two women who were the interim superintendents were excellent managers. And they came in and they just managed well. They didn't try and have any agenda. They didn't do anything. It was like they didn't want to rock the boat and they had the trust of our people. The problem with the superintendent that we hired, and I fall back to what Dr. Muir said last week at the meeting. She said, you know, we are so well positioned. We have a lot of people in good positions here that we're really in a good spot. The problem we had back then was we started losing people quickly. After Dr. Marshall left, Sheila left to go with Dr. Marshall, eventually, not right away. This woman, I'm trying to remember, do I have the name down here? I do have the name down here. Oh, yeah. Barbara Conti, who was kind of like a do-everything woman. She was at least HR, but she did a lot of stuff. And she actually helped us put our package together to go out. She eventually left to go work with the superintendent. And we knew our special ed director was nearing retirement, and she left within that first year. So we had three key people that within a half a year to a year after Dr. Marshall left that we lost. So the two acting superintendents, the two interims, they said, you know, we don't want to put anybody in. We want your new superintendent to deal with this. So we're just going to manage as things are going. And that's what we did. When the new superintendent came in, she brought in three people, not right away, but she hired three people in those positions that they were somewhat local, but over a quick period of time, they didn't fit in with our culture. And so what happened was we were getting a lot of stress within administration, and I was hearing especially some of the complaints at that time. And I realized, thinking back, that managing our people when you have good people is a key thing. And I don't know how to tell you how we can grade that. And we can look at all the paperwork. People can be great on paper, PhDs, et cetera, good backgrounds. But how do you know if somebody is going to manage a group of people, you know, very well? And I don't know what to tell you. We're going to have to figure that out. So the lessons learned, if there were lessons learned, I think that it's tough to do it yourself. We could do it ourselves, I think, but it takes a lot of time. And that's something that the subcommittee would have to realize. It takes a lot of time to put the package together, to do all these interviews, et cetera. But obviously that's an option. What we did, and I think worked well, is we shouldn't set any minimums. We shouldn't say, okay, well, we're going to have at least 5 people as finalists, or 7 people is this or 12 people is that, because when you tie yourself into that, then you do tie yourself in. And if you don't get the appropriate people, if there's a big drop off between your top 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever it is, to whatever other number you need for the minimum, then that's a problem. It becomes a problem. And then the other kind of lesson learned, and I thought of this later in our second go around when Dr. Marshall left, is there are a lot of choices how to set this up. Not everybody's going to be happy with the choices. Some might say, oh, we should do this procedure, we should do that procedure. But when the school committee votes a procedure, and that's where we're going forward, that's what we have to live with. And I think last time there were people who didn't like the procedure, and when it came time to vote for Sheila, she didn't get votes not because she wasn't great, but because people didn't like the procedure. And to me, that was like punishing a person who had nothing to do with setting up the procedure, but somehow she was kind of punished by not having the votes. And for me to think that if I was in that position thinking, gee, why aren't these people voting for me? And if I went to that person and said, well, why don't you vote for me? If they said, well, we liked you, but we just didn't like the procedure, so we weren't going to vote for you. I just think that that's something, it had no effect on us getting Dr. Muir in the superintendent position, but going forward, you don't know how many votes are going to be for whatever person. And I want to make sure that that doesn't affect somebody who could be the person we want, but might not get a vote or two because somebody's not happy with the procedure we took. So that was kind of a lesson learned that I thought. And that's pretty much it. It's a long slog. I took a lot of personal time off to do these interviews. When we did that, to go to the school districts,
The visits.
to the visits, yeah, to the other school districts. Just reading all the letters that people sent in. I mean, it was an interesting experience. But if you want to go that route, if you recommend that route for the full committee, you have to be ready to devote a lot of time to it, I think.
And I just want to mention that you're right. If you create and you want to do it yourself, you can do that, and we can do that. But then your search committee becomes a screening committee, because then you eventually get community representatives and teachers, students, whatever you might decide to do. And then you have to teach, and that could be with consulting and everything. You can do all those type of things. But then it's confidentiality, because remember, if you do it yourself, it's confidential all the way to the finalists. When the finalists, and we were told that too with NESC, NASDAQ, and that, when it's semifinalists on the screening, it's all confidential, and whoever's running it, whoever's doing it. And you have to work with people to tell them that it is confidential. By the way, did you have community members and things like that? Did your committee do that? Or was it all school committee related?
The screening committee that looked over the 51 letters, we had some teachers, we had a couple of administrators, we had a couple of school committee members. Yeah. I don't think we had any parents. My recollection is there were no parents, but but yeah, we did. It wasn't just school committee members that did it.
And you were the lead, right?
I ran it.
You were in. So again, it was the confidentiality and everything else, because folks are putting in, and until you're the finalists, then the finalists are public knowledge, because then you end up doing site visits, and it works both ways. They come to the district and get a visit and a meet with people, and that has to be put all together. And then the other way, when your subcommittee members go somewhere and go to the other district and interview folks and go through a process. So I thought it was good to give you a quick outline of what, just to remember for us. Joanne knew and didn't know what happened in 2018, what happened in 2006, 7?
Yeah, around that time.
6 or 7. Which speaks volumes in one way, that you don't have a lot you have stability, we have stability in Quabbin. We're not doing superintendent searches every 3 to 5 years and things like that. So that's really all those pieces. Cheryl, can you just give us a quick piece on a procurement perspective as it relates to 30B, scope service, those type of things, or what that world is about?
Sure. So procuring a service of this nature is required because these services aren't exempt under Massachusetts 30B laws. So if you expect that the cost is going to be greater than $10,000, you must do a formal procurement through the quote process. Recently, that law was changed from $10,000 to $50,000, from 10 to 100. And what happened though, when they did that, is the legislature took away our ability to do an RFP where we can judge the qualifications of a service provider and choose someone who is not the lowest bidder. So at this point, if we go out to bid and we put quotes out, we are mandated to take the lowest bidder.
We are mandated.
Yes.
Even if it's under 10, Cheryl?
No, if it's under 10, you do not need to go out. If it's $9,999, it's suspicious.
Right.
But it's legal.
But it's legal.
Technically,
I mean,
Yes.
technically, it's either legal or not.
Okay, so that's Walter and Deb, was that pretty clear on that part?
For me, it was.
What scope and service, what is that phrase and what does that mean?
well, I think you were using a different phrase that I didn't know what that one meant, but it means a scope of services is a scope of work. What
Yep.
do you want this service provider to do for you? It needs to be very detailed so that when you put the contract into place, they're doing what you want.
Okay,
And can you help us with that?
Absolutely, absolutely. That's part of my job as the procurement officer.
Okay.
any questions for school committee members before I give it to Deb and let Deb go forward? Good. I think this was I hope this was helpful, not only what you have in your packet and the wisdom that we heard of somebody who did a search from A to Z inside the process and the time consuming and what it did and the lessons learned and things like that. So Deb, I'm going to turn it over to you and see what you'd like to do, because even on the agenda, I just wanted to be able to say, you have in the packet a district profile. We have the superintendent's job description. We can look at, you can do that, whatever you need. 4 is, a decision that you guys can work on, and a timeline. If you need some, if you want to further talk on it, that's whatever you need. But I'd like to honor subcommittee work and the folks that lead those type of things and be part of that. So Deb, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate all the information from both you and Lee. It's going to be super helpful. I really am looking forward to kind of jumping right in and looking through that. I did have a few questions first, if you don't mind, to follow up. Lee, all I was thinking about when you were talking is the time involved in doing a search ourselves. Do you remember like a ballpark? Did it take you 3 months, 6 months total time, or what was the time period? Do you remember?
It was a longer time period because we had the 2 acting supers, the 2 interim supers, and I think each one of them was 6 months, if I remember right, or at least the Bev Brown, I think, was 6 months, and maybe.
They were both here for the course of a whole year.
It was 1 year.
Mrs. Frost here, yeah, okay. Right, so we had, I mean, we started putting our stuff together pretty quickly, and we did a number of iterations. Like I say, Barbara Conti did a lot of the work before she left to go with Dr. Marshall. So she did a couple months of work. And there were like constant little meetings. Oh, come and look at this, come and look at this. So that was a lot of time initially, like the first 2 or 3 months. And then when we had the interims and things seemed to be going well, I don't want to say we slowed down a bit, but we kind of took a little more time to try and make sure, everything was there. And I don't remember when we went out finally, I don't know if we gave people like 30 days to respond, or because we talked about, we're going, they put it out so nationwide, so to speak. And so I wanted to say it was close to 30 days, but I might be wrong there. And we even got people who came in after the timeline. We got some a couple
They already had.
people that came in and said, one person was good. I think we actually got one from Canada.
We have to get to that point.
Ontario or something like that, but they came in after the timeline, and we didn't waive anything. We stuck to our timeline there. So once we had certain timelines out, we stuck to them pretty much. But I think part of what made us feel good was because both of these interims were doing just such a good job. Everything was, I hate to say it, it was going pretty smoothly for that year time frame.
Thank you. That's what I was worried about is, an extended period of time.
That's something you're going to have to, once again, it would be a consideration of your subcommittee to say, do we want to look at an interim? Is that something we want to look at? I think right now I read that Northampton, they have an interim who they said can also apply for superintendent, and their timeline is March 31st, I think. And I think they're using MASC as opposed to NASDAQ. So that might be another entity we might want to look at and see how they've done it with MASC, as opposed to NASDAQ. But that, once again, something we might get information on.
Or again, you can, if you're looking at how the process is, I'm not sure if you could, put together a quote, if we want to do a quote for 3 entities and things like that. Or like we did last time, you were on the committee when we listened to NASDAQ, whatever. And again, I got to rely on the procurement person to make sure what we do and do it right. I don't want to take your words, but I was just saying we have those options. So I know you're drilling down to kind of figure out what does the timeline look like.
Can I ask a quick question of Cheryl? Cheryl, how, if we put a scope of services together, is that something we can just email to 3 people, or does that have to go through a formal process like when you do other procurement? You're muted.
It's more of an informal process. When you do a quote, you get the scope of services together. You do put a deadline as to when you want the quote back. So you can do it as quick as you'd like to do. But you just have to make sure that scope is really detailed enough so that you make the right decision.
Okay.
And while I have the mic, Deb, if I could just say something.
Bring it on.
Go ahead, Cheryl.
So I'm one of the few people in the room that actually went through this process twice before. And even if the committee wishes to put out an RFQ and have a third party help with the search, please know that the school committee does need to be involved the whole time and put in the time, because you don't want to delegate some things to a third party. If you want to go to someone's school and check things out, the school committee should do that. Just don't delegate things.
I agree.
Because that could work out not as well as we hope.
I agree. I recently was on the town administrator search committee for the town of Hubbardston, and kind of like Lee, been there, done that type of, I think there was things that I'm thinking should have been done or handled differently, but it wasn't under our purview. So I agree with you. I think we do need to be extremely involved in this process because we are a unique district and we have great people and we need to make sure that this is the right fit. So I would like to know how, all the other subcommittee members feel so that we can kind of start to have some of these discussions. So Walter, do you want to start? And
Sure. I, for one, I think it's too big a job for us to take on a really good, deep search by ourselves. I hate to spend the money. I hate to spend the district's money. And I know it's going to be more than 10,000 because last time the MSAC, they wanted 12,000. So, and that was in, 2018. So I'm sure it's gone up since then. So we're going to have to go through that. I think I don't know if we can do a hybrid thing, but I think we should be very involved and very on top of the process throughout, and yeah, that's about all I have. I'm in favor of, bringing in a search firm, but that doesn't mean anybody else has to be. It's just my opinion.
thank you, Walter. Anyone else care to share how they're feeling initially through this?
Deb, I agree with Walter as well. I mean, the time consuming efforts is, unfortunately, we all work as well. So, but I do believe that with Walter about maybe if we could do a hybrid model where they can do the search and then we can divvy it up. So, but that's my thoughts.
Thank you, Dave. Trish?
Well, I'm not on the subcommittee, but I've probably been here longer than everyone that's on the meet tonight. But I really would hope that we would take the time to find the person that will fit into Quabbin Regional District. So I would really hope that we go outside and work with a firm that will lead us in the right direction. I was on the committee that Lee was referring to, and it takes time, but that's what you want. You don't want to just make a rash decision, and because we need someone, if we have to do an interim, we had great interims when we had them back then, and which was a while ago. But I just really, I'm asking you to take the time and let us find a person, and I really hope that the administrators have a lot of input because we're the ones that are working with them, or he or she. And I just really hope that we are allowed to have the input that we deserve. And that's all I'm asking. Thank you.
You're welcome. I can't speak for the whole committee, but we're a family here, so of course.
Yes.
Colleen?
Thanks, Deb. I wonder if it would be helpful, I think, to Mark's point, we have a lot of really great things in place. If we identify what could we do, so we could figure out what that hybrid would be possibly. And the other thing I just want to kind of put out there is from a candidate's perspective, I do think there's some credibility when they see that one of these sort of groups are involved in the search. So I'm just, not that we couldn't do it totally ourselves. I believe we can, but I think sometimes when people are looking, they do pay attention to that.
Thank you. That was good input. Joanne, do you have some thoughts?
Yeah, I'm pretty much on board with, hiring a firm, but at the same time, I think working closely with that firm and also going along with what Tricia said, I do think it's really, really important that we do have input from the administrators in the buildings and, because they're, boots on the ground doing the day-to-day. And I think that their input would be really valuable and insightful and helpful to us in our search.
Great, thank you. Peggy, do you have thoughts you'd like to share?
No, Deb, I agree with everybody. I mean, the process last time was pretty tough. I was kind of I think we were put back a little bit because it felt like we just had Sheila, and I love Sheila. And I do, and I was one of the people who voted that way that Lee was talking about. And I would never want to offend a person because I'm voting on the system rather than the person. I agree with Lee that way. So, you know, we just have to do our homework and make sure we're in the right direction with whatever we do.
Great. I think it sounds like we're all kind of in agreement. I think we need to hear from at least MASC and NASDAQ. So Cheryl will have to rely more back on to you. Do we need to go out for a formal quote at this time just to get the scope of services and get that presentation? Or
Rewrite the scope of services, Deb. So the committee, basically that packet that Mark went over for everybody, that's where you would pull it from. You want to have enough information in there, because they're also, what a firm will do is they also put out the flyer that they send out to everybody. The emails that they send out, globally to everybody will come from the information. A lot of the information that's in that job description for the superintendent, what their goals have been, what our district goals are, those types of things are part of that marketing data that goes out. What you want in the search for a firm itself, I can do a survey of business managers and grab what they have done and look what they have done. That could be our starting point. And then I could put something together and give it to you for the committee to review.
that would be perfect if you could help us with that. I'd really appreciate it.
Just not before my first budget presentation, please.
No, I
Which
won't
is
do that to
Tuesday.
you. And
Which is
that's
Tuesday, right?
Yes.
That's Tuesday.
Deb, a question
Sure, go ahead.
for Cheryl, actually. If the subcommittee were to recommend an interim superintendent from the financial, not cost, but how would do we have to go out to a minimum, or how would that work? Because I don't even remember how that worked.
Well, no, the school committee has the full scope and authority to hire an interim superintendent. You could post for one, but I mean, you don't have to put any bidding out for anything like that. You have the authority to appoint an interim superintendent.
If I remember correctly, that would, there's like an organization of retired superintendents that kind of have those people in queue.
Oh, okay.
But again, I just my little input too is that's great. I'm glad that the committee is looking at other aspects and Cheryl's able to help. And when you do that query, Cheryl, aside from NASDAQ, MSC, I know the Collins Center does it too. I know that. I don't know if there's any other local organizations that do superintendent. I'm not looking for national search firms, those type of things. Is there anybody else that's local that you're aware of?
Not that I'm aware of, Mark, but when I put out that inquiry to my business manager listserv, I can ask that, like, who did you use and how did you find out other sources of these services?
Okay.
I can do that tonight.
Thank you, Cheryl. So I think one other question I had was, I think we all agree time's of the essence to get this started, but we need to be mindful of, like you said, Colleen, maybe making a list of what we can do ourselves and try to offset some costs and make sure that we have the involvement that we feel is important. We need to be handling and not having someone else handle for us. Do we have any money budgeted for this? Do we have any idea, or do we just see what the quotes come in at that point? And also on the superintendent's salary, do we do any research into, if we're competitive or, what the rates are at this time? I know that was a big drawback looking for town administrators in Hubbardston is, the wages aren't as high out this way. And it is a lot with 5 towns for a superintendent to come in and, it's a unique circumstance to have a big district like this. So those are my questions a little bit about, what our financial and the budget, and I know it's budget season for you as well, so we need to be mindful of your time.
Mrs. Chamberlain, I reached out to Tom Scott from MASs in regard to salaries for superintendents. He wouldn't share that with me. He would only share that with superintendents. However, he did say that if we want to give him a list of school districts that we're interested in, maybe in our region or, other regional school districts, he could provide that information, but he can't just give us the list of 300 and some odd superintendent salaries. So once we come up with a list, I can send that to him.
Great, that would be great. Thank you, Jess.
He may not be able to do that or not be willing to do that. That shocks me, by the way, but Nancy Landry can absolutely send out an inquiry on her listserv and ask if you've had a new superintendent, what are their salaries? That's public information that should be readily available. So she could do that for us, Deb.
Great.
As far as budgeting, are you kidding me? She just told everybody this week that she's leaving, right? No, there's no budget for the search. And I think the reason we think we have to go out for a quote on this, I thought there was some information already provided by somebody, Jess, that it would start at like $10,800.
I reached out on my listserv to a few somewhat local schools that are doing a superintendent search, and one of them did come back and say that they were using MASC and it was $10,800.
For a full, for a
Yep,
full
for a full search.
perspective.
I
Okay.
had someone else come back and say they had done it themselves, and they would highly not recommend that.
Yes, I think we know right off from the start that we might have to put out a procurement for this. Again, that shouldn't take very long. And I'll get an email out to the business manager listserv tonight to ask who they've used and how much it cost them to do this search.
Great, thank you very much. Mark, do we need a motion for this? Would that be better, or?
I think that would be a good idea. And then from a perspective of when you could get together next to be able to get from Cheryl that information, so that could be then put out as quickly as possible, or be able to make a recommendation then to the full committee to do that. But we definitely want the subcommittee to kind of move where they think is appropriate to bring stuff back to us. So I think that's a good idea.
I agree. I think we all have a lot of homework to do. I know myself just looking over the documents and the websites, and I think we each, taken volunteering for this committee, kind of signed on to do a little bit of extra work while we're involved with this process, but it's important work. So how does everybody feel? I don't want to overwhelm your schedules, but I would like to keep this moving as quickly as we can so we can make, a decent report on some progress and kind of a little direction maybe that we're thinking of going or looking at our next school committee meeting. So what's everyone's schedules and thoughts on kind of what, Cheryl, how long do they have to go out? 30 days after you post? What are you looking at for a timeline?
Sorry, Deb, I was in the middle of the email. When it's this kind of a quote, you don't have to do that. There's no formal notification, anything like that. So that's why I'll get a few names from colleagues, hopefully. You just send them an email. The subcommittee can set the deadline for when you want quotes in, and we go from there.
So, okay, Deb, did you hear that?
Yeah, I'm looking at my calendar. So our next full school committee meeting would be February 9th, correct?
Yes.
Is it unreasonable to put a quote out for like 14 days, Cheryl, or is it typically 30?
No, Deb, typically a posting on any type of procurement is at least 2 weeks, unless you're talking about building projects and stuff like that. But like I said, this one here, you can put a 2-week deadline on it.
I don't want to interrupt the serious conversation, but we just got a call from the superintendent. There's no school tomorrow.
Yeah, I just got that. as well.
I'm updating the TVs as we speak.
Dave, did you have something you wanted to add, Dave, or did you have your hand up? How does everybody feel about putting that out for a 2-week period? Do you think that's sufficient time? Okay.
Can I
Whenever
ask a
you,
question? Are we going to get together prior to putting it out as a subcommittee to go over exactly what we want on that scope of services?
that was actually what I was getting to next, Jess. You
Okay,
read my
sorry.
mind.
We
No,
actually have
that's
to bring it-
fine. I know, I'm trying to look at a calendar and think like with our next meeting and how to get all of this in beforehand. We need 48 hours to post
We're good.
a meeting,
Correct.
right?
Yes.
We
Deb?
have,
Oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead, Walter.
Do we want to bring this before the entire school committee to vote on it before we proceed, or can we do this as a subcommittee?
We can do it as a
I
sub.
think you could do it as a
You
subcommittee.
should do it as a subcommittee.
I think you do it as a subcommittee, Deb, because then you can report out. If this can work, and as you're working your timeline, you'd be able to make a potential recommendation even, at the school committee, at least bring update and what you've done. And it gives authority too. We, as the school committee, did give the authority of the subcommittee to kind of move. So you're not saying yes to something yet. You're looking at a procedure, a process to show options.
That was my thought process, was that if we could get this scope together, and if Cheryl, I know this is probably the worst possible time for her, but if we could get this posted and at least have some type of information to report to the full committee on the 9th.
That is a little tight. So the committee, I can put something to get together. Your subcommittee has to have a meeting to review that information. Then I can get it posted. Even if I got it posted on January 30th, that's not 2 weeks. I mean, we can say that we have it posted, but you won't get any results. If you want to give these firms 2 weeks to put their quote together, if that's what you want to do. I'm looking at a calendar right now, and honestly,
No, I don't want to push it if the time's not going to work and we're not going to be able to get the information we need. That
Yeah,
doesn't make
so
sense.
if you can give me, if I can get this question out to the listserv and I get any responses, that'll give me a helping hand on how to start writing this, then I'll let you know directly, you and Walter know directly that I've gotten something and I'm working on it, because then you'll have to have a meeting before we can put this out to, make sure the subcommittee's all on board before it hits the paper, okay? All right, so why
Sure,
don't we leave it at that then? I will, as soon as oops, I lost your face because I'm doing too many things at once. Why don't we leave it at that? I'll let you know when I get some results and I start working on this, and then we can set a meeting for the subcommittee to meet up again.
Okay, that makes sense then. Yeah,
Okay.
I
thank you.
mean, I'd like to move as quickly as we can, but if we're not gonna get what we need, if we're not gonna get what we need, it's pointless, so we need to do this right. Let me look at my list. How does everyone feel? Do you want to wait until we get the presentations from these quotes before we talk about maybe what we can handle? Or do you think that that's something that we should start thinking about now? What pieces? Why don't we do this maybe after we review all the documents and Cheryl sends out and we get the scope going at our next meeting? I'd like to be able to maybe keep our meetings, pretty regular, if we can, till we can get, our direction and get going on this. But I think we need some time to absorb all of the information Mark presented us with first.
Can I just share something? I'm just, as you're talking it through, what Cheryl is able to try to get for information, and she gets the skeleton, she can be able to put the skeleton together. She's then still looking for the particulars, a profile, surveys, whatever it might be. You could still meet, as quickly as you can to fill that skeleton. Because I think that's what she was talking about, is getting it all ready. And then we're confirming, your committee's confirming, okay, what are we asking for? You're asking for a profile, you're asking for interviews, you're asking for this, that type of thing. It's really an A, B, C, D, E, F, G.
Exactly, Mark. If I could just build on that, Debbie, yeah, this scope has to include how much our committee is going to do. So are you going to be involved in all of the interviews, the first round, the second round, the third round? Are you going to be involved in going to their districts when it comes to that point? Are you going to be involved of letting them come to our districts, who are going to conduct those meetings and those walkthroughs? That all has to be part of this scope. So this committee has to decide how much it's going to want to be involved, so that the person quoting knows what is expected of them.
I was kind of thinking we were going to have all that information included, and then I remembered before, like with the different pricing, I was thinking they would come back, but that makes sense.
No, you have to tell them what you want them to
Right.
bid on.
Okay, so I think we need to wait and hear from you and then set our next meeting.
I'm halfway through the email already.
I think one of the things we need to think about is the geographic area we want to draw from. Do we want to stay in New England? Do we want to go northeast? How far do we want to go to do a site visit? We don't
know that yet.
We don't want to go to Montana,
But you don't know that yet. You don't know what, you don't know who you're going to get.
Right.
You might want to go.
I love Montana. I've been there a couple of times. So I think that's one of the parameters we need to think about. But I personally, I think I would like to do the site visits and be able to maybe talk to some of the people that are working there. If we had, we could, I don't know if that's permissible, but, maybe talk to some of the teachers that we bump into and things like that.
Yeah. We had, I think we had like 2 applicants from California, and one was really good on paper. But that was part of our conversation, was like, are they going to come here and live in Barry, just move right into Barry or into the region someplace? Yeah. The fact that they did all this stuff in California, how portable is some of that to our district? And we didn't know anything about their district. Like I say, on paper, they looked really good. It was very professionally well put together, but we eventually didn't let them make the cut because there were just too many variables there, even though they looked very good on paper. So I think that, the geographic part, I think, is a good point.
And then I think, Deb, that Cheryl kind of, made the comment that once she gets that further information, starts looking at something like that, and then I think she said she'd get back to you and Walter as to when they could schedule a meeting for your subcommittee. So I think so in a way, you're right. You could put a placeholder, but if you don't, that's fine. But I think Cheryl articulated that should get back to you ASAP. So you guys could then, again, get together to be able to put the shell together of what you want for the service.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking of running like something parallel just so we could keep the work moving and progressing quickly. But no, it makes perfect sense the way Cheryl has outlined it. So as much as you want to get going with it, you gotta do it right. So Trish, did you want to add something?
Well, I was just going to say, when they were just talking about having applicants from out of state, many of us have young children who are in different states right now, and someone gave them a chance and they were willing to move there. So, I understand that we want someone around here, but there are a lot of people that are willing to relocate. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Just being a mom.
I add something to that? The other thing that, Lee, I remember that process many years ago. And I was involved with that at that point. We didn't have Zoom or Google Meet or anything like that at that point.
You're
So I
right.
think you can virtually visit places like NEASC in the past 2 or 3 years has done visits at high schools virtually. So, I mean, there's a process that you can put in place.
And that's a good point, because you're right, we didn't have any of that
Yeah.
ability.
And you might be tying the hands of the search firm if we say, they have to be in Massachusetts or whatever.
Like we had a guy that came here to teach physics this year from Oregon, who grew up in Massachusetts and wanted to move back. So you never know what's out there.
Right, yeah, that's true.
Okay, anyone else have anything they'd like to add? Cheryl, thank you so much for all your help. I know this is like the worst possible time for you, and to put more on your plate, I really do appreciate it. And that's another thing I was really thinking, if we did, a lot of this, we can't burden the administration, too much with our work. We need to kind of take this on. They've got enough on their plates running the district. So hopefully we can find a good hybrid balance that will work well for us and be cost effective.
And that's why, Deb, I hope this packet is very, very helpful, that you have not only a stepping point, a profile, all those pieces. And then, like you said, whatever you develop as a committee, what you guys want to do, and then you can plug in to those perspectives for the quote, and then you can go from there.
Yeah, it's going to be so helpful. I was so thrilled because I just finished work before we logged in, so I hadn't had time to look in the drive or anything yet. So seeing all those documents is going to be really helpful. And I would encourage all of us to look through and kind of highlight and think make our own lists of what's important. So when we do get together with Cheryl, we can, kind of be focused and make this as efficient as we can for her too. So does anybody have anything else they'd like to add tonight, or?
The only thing I'm going to say is thank you for taking this committee on, all members, and it's all you. And I can be a reference point of anything you need. I have no problem to do that if you ever need anything. But we validate and understand the work of our subcommittees. So I welcome and looking forward to hear as you continue to work through and be able to inform us as we work through this process. Thank you, both of you, and all members of the team.
Thank you, Mark. We will definitely be relying on you for information, and maybe you as well, Lee. So don't go too far. Walter, anything you'd like to add?
No, motion to adjourn.
Second, anyone?
Second.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right.
Have a good night, everyone.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Talk soon.
Thank you.